In the vast universe stretching across billions of light years, where power is determined by war and life can be erased in the blink of an eye, an ancient empire believed it was about to complete yet another conquest. Earth a small, savage, and weak planet in their eyes. But they were wrong, terribly wrong, because humanity doesn't fight to win. They hide to survive. They pretend to lose, to deceive. And when their fury is awakened, the entire galaxy trembles. 12 colossal machines warships born from another dimension rise from the shadows, not to take revenge, but to send a warning. Something far more terrifying is coming. A threat with no form. Not from the stars, but from the very fractures in reality itself. This is no longer a story of war. It is the final battle for existence. The false dance of victory. From the command deck of the Super Dreadnought, Eternal Glory, the ultimate pride of the Hegemony Empire, Admiral Kim stood with solemn dignity. The bluish glow of tactical screens cast cold reflections across the metallic scales lining his body. In the four emotionless eyes of Kima, signature trait of the Hemi species, there was nothing but the programming of tradition, absolute faith in victory, and an unshakable pride in an empire that had subdued hundreds of worlds without hearing a single plea for mercy. Before him, the final images of the battle over Jupiter's orbit flickered and faded. Humanity's fleet, small, crude, built with outdated technology, was being crushed, surrounded, and hunted like ants lost in a sea of fire. To the Hemi, this was the final rite of Conquest's ceremonial purge, a graceful, helpless retreat of the defeated. No significant resistance, no surprises. Everything unfolded exactly as the strategy map had foretold, cycles ago. Behind Kim, the command floor buzzed like a meticulously calibrated hive. Officers from 17 allied species of the hegemony alternated in reporting, checking systems, fine-tuning data, and offering clinical congratulations. Screens floated along luminous pillars, displaying metrics of overwhelming dominance. From the right-hand console, a series of encrypted signals pulsed through. Data analysis confirmed. Humanity's flagship was destroyed. The remaining fleet scattered in disarray. No formation, no coordinated defense. It was the final confirmation. The battle was over. There was no cheering, no outburst of celebration aboard the Eternal Glory, for that was not the hegemony way. Victory was inevitable. The natural conclusion of a civilization that had ruled space for 8,000 years. They did not celebrate triumph. They logged it another link in an unbroken chain of conquest. Admiral Kim, without turning, could sense the reverent gazes of his subordinates. He raised his hand and issued a simple command. Begin the journey to Earth. That command, quiet and sharp, thundered through the galactic silence. It triggered an endless cascade of reactions. Fleets mobilized, motherships charged, relay stations switched codes. Earth, the origin of mankind, was now the final destination. No more barriers. No bastion remained standing between hegemony and total victory. But elsewhere, far from the self-satisfied gaze of hegemony, deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, buried beneath layers of unyielding earth, was a secret base no recon drone had ever discovered. In that dim, silent chamber, amid devices shielded by electromagnetic cloaks and decoy signals, a man stood before a control panel protected by a 16-character encrypted code. General Song, commander of Earth's most classified strategic protocol, stared at the lone line on the screen. Asterisk, asterisk. Activation confirmed. Operation Lazarus. Asterisk, asterisk. For 10 years. This phrase existed only as a contingency. A whispered legend, a card never played. Song hesitated not a second longer. He pressed confirm. Instantly, warning lights turned from red to green. Underground nodes powered up. Alpha-grade encrypted signals coursed through an independent quantum network, connecting to space coordinates unknown even to humanity's own astronomers. The Phantom Fleet, or rather Earth's real fleet, received the call. At the edge of the solar system, in voids thought empty, where darkness reigned and temperatures neared absolute zero, colossal machines began to stir. Each was a beast 5 kilometers long, hidden for a decade in dimensional pockets, technology beyond the understanding of any known civilization. No one in the hegemony had even guessed at the existence of these ships. No one had questioned why humanity, so-called inferior species, had resisted for 10 years without surrendering. Because what the hegemony had seen was a play, a masterpiece of deception. A mask cracked at just the right time to fool those who believed themselves the center of the universe. Asterisk, asterisk. Operation Lazarus. Asterisk, asterisk was not merely a counterattack. It was the resurrection of what was thought dead, a declaration that humanity had never been weak. They had only waited for the perfect moment. In that very instant, across two ends of the universe, two forces began to move toward one another. One believed victory was already theirs. The other was finally revealing its true face. And in the vast emptiness, the hegemony's victory dance had begun to echo. Only, it would not last long. The unbound arms. 10 years of war, a decade of blood and shattered metal drifting through cold orbits, where every battle was more than combative, was a performance of what humanity, that is, wanted its enemies to believe. In the classified strategy logs of the Earth Defense Command, the war with the hegemony was never documented as all out. Instead, it was defined by a single phrase: intentional limitation. From the earliest days the hegemony entered the solar system, humanity understood they could not win through conventional means. Compared to an alliance with 8 millennia of conquest behind it, Earth's defense fleet crude, slow, disjointed, was like carpenters wielding sticks against plasma cannons. But humanity did not retreat. They chose to disguise. They chose to act. Every defeat was scripted. Every lost sector was cleared from within. The destroyed ships carried obsolete tech, exposed deliberate flaws, and mistakenly deployed outdated tactics to appear predictable. The hegemony's officers, arrogant and cold, needed no convincing that humans were a primitive species, and that was the bait. In a cryptographically masked zone near the edge of the Kuiper Belt, far from any civilian satellite, beyond the reach of all hegemony, Scansa's zone of absolute darkness began to change. Space warped. Light seemed to fall inward. And then, pale streaks of shadow slithered outward, as if the universe itself was giving birth to something never seen before. This was not a miracle. It was the dimensional pocket, a space-folding technology developed by humans in total secrecy, hidden from every galactic superpower. While the galaxy believed mankind was merely stepping into deep space, they had done what even ancient races dared not dream, created an independent layer of reality to hide their forces. From within this shroud, 12 Dreadnought-class warships began to awaken, each over 5 kilometers long, clad in refractive armor that absorbed all electromagnetic frequencies. They did not shine, nor reflect, nor emit any signal detectable in the optical spectrum. They did not reveal themselves, they existed, and that existence alone made the fabric of space tremble. On the bridge of the first Dreadnought, Humanity's Shield, Captain Kang conducted the final energy system check. For over a decade, he and hundreds of thousands in the Phantom Fleet had lived and trained in absolute isolation. No sunlight, no earthbound contact, only simulations of war, extreme environment drills, and non-linear space combat exercises. They were not a standing force. They were a sword in its sheath, placed where none could see, none could touch until the moment of reckoning. And that moment had come. The command to activate Operation Lazarus echoed through the quantum internal comms. No music, no sirens, just a blinking, frigid signal on the display. Asterisk, asterisk. Activation confirmed. Priority target, Hegemony flagship, Eternal Glory. Asterisk, asterisk. In the main reactor chamber, a core began to surge with Class 7 plasma, forbidden energy source never publicly revealed by humankind. All weapon systems were unlocked. Molecular disintegration cannons, layered plasma rifles, and pulse gravitational fields came online. No one spoke. No one smiled. Because this was not just a battle. It was an unveiling. The moment when humanity's mask would fall in, the galaxy would be forced to see what it had misunderstood for a decade. Back at the central base beneath the Rocky Mountains, control panels flared to life. General Hanthy, overseer of the Dreadnought project from day one, silently observed the tactical display. Dozens of new symbols emerged, representing ships that no artificial intelligence in the hegemony had ever indexed. They carried no ID tags, no registry codes, only one symbol, an Earth wrapped in a silver shield, a sigil that existed in no official database of known human iconography. Each Dreadnought was assigned targets. Half would conduct a surgical strike on hegemony command. The others would form a space blockade, intercept reinforcements, annihilate heavy cruisers, and destroy orbital command hubs. The final order came from Hannett spoken aloud, but as a single, simple string of code. Asterisk, asterisk. Commence resurrection. Asterisk, asterisk. Across the far edge of the galaxy, the massive warships turned. Hidden compartments opened, revealing cannons capable of tearing moons apart with a single volley. And then, space cracked again, this time not to hide, but to reveal. Those the galaxy had forgotten now returned, not to prove anything, but to remind the stars, the arms once bound, are now unchained. Fractures in reality? On the command bridge of the eternal glory, silence no longer carried the satisfaction it once did. Instead, it pressed heavy, rippling like air on the verge of collapse. Unusual signals began overlapping across the main control panels, prompting officers on duty to repeatedly verify the system's status. But all machinery was functioning perfectly. The anomaly wasn't in the equipment, it was in space itself. Science Officer Park, a young officer from the Tien Rao speciesist extraordinary race, capable of intuitively processing quantum mathematical models, was the first to sense something was wrong. On her screen, data from the outer reaches of the solar system defied every known law of physics cataloged by the Hegemony. Space fields oscillated erratically. Fundamental physical constants shifted at the nanoscale in rhythmic patterns, almost as if the universe were breathing. She didn't delay. Models were generated immediately. Analysis commenced. And then, within the three-dimensional spatial grid, distortions emerged clearly. A chain of fractures forming in the fabric of reality rips in the structure of space itself, too small for the naked eye, but undeniable in quantum models. They didn't spread or tear appeared as if opened from within. Though she bore a scientific mind and absolute loyalty, Park couldn't suppress the chill crawling down her spine. Spatial fractures were ethereal tales found in ancient manuscripts, in simulations never tested. Even the Hegemony, with its 8,000 years of advancement, had barely reached theoretical modeling. So why were they real? And why, here, in the heart of the solar system? Reports were quickly escalated to Admiral Kim, but he was unimpressed. Having survived hundreds of campaigns, Kim had grown accustomed to scientific panic from young officers, those who spun anomalies into fantasies. To him, humanity's fall was inevitable, and no tiny fracture could change that. He dismissed it as residual battlefield distortion, echoes of human ship explosions. But Park didn't stop. She dug deeper, overlaying historical data and comparing energy signatures. Then something terrifying emerged. One of the signals she detected matched by 97% an energy signature first recorded by the Hegemony 50 years ago during initial contact with Earth. At the time, analysts had deemed it a sensor glitch, a temporary anomaly. No one believed that a primitive species like humanity could produce energy with dimensional resonance, a trait of multi-layered spatial manipulation. But now that same signal was backnot, weak, not distorted, but clear, deliberate, and pulsing with intent. Park gave it a name, the Lazarus pattern. Meanwhile, beyond Neptune's orbit, seemingly empty space began to distort. No light, no sound, just strange vibrations spreading like ripples across a pond. And then, one by one, fractures widened, not through brute force, but through the sheer will of technology. From those fractures, darkness poured. Space itself seemed to erupt, ejecting matter never before recorded. And then, massive slabs of black-gray metal emerged, as if forged in the heart of a black hole, absorbing all light, all energy they touched. The Dreadnoughts had entered the stage. No announcements, no introductions, no identification signals. They simply were. Back on the Hegemony flagship, alert systems flared across the board. No one knew where these giants had come from. They ignored all attempts at communication. They bore no recognizable design of warships. Yet all sensors confirmed. They were weapons and they were moving toward the heart of the solar system. Comms officers reported an additional anomaly. Artificial magnetic fields spreading across space far beyond any technological benchmark the Hegemony had ever associated with humanity. One scout ship intercepted a keyword from an encrypted signal emanating from Earth. Asterisk, asterisk. Operation Lazarus. Asterisk, asterisk. For the first time since the campaign began, Admiral Kim felt an unfamiliar unease creeping into his mind. Lazarus, an ancient religious symbol of humanity, one that spoke of resurrection from the dead, a name not chosen by accident. He ordered an upgrade to full alert status. The Hegemony fleet, over 5,000 warships from allied species, was instructed to maintain combat formation and scan the full electromagnetic spectrum. Though Kim still refused to believe this was a real threat, he could not ignore the instinct that had kept him alive through countless wars. At the solar system's edge, the Dreadnoughts drifted forward silently, not rushing, not attacking, not defending. They simply existed like dense black stars against the night sky, bearing a secret the galaxy was about to witness. The sleeper beneath the green veil, far beyond planetary orbits, where sunlight dwindled into drifting motes lost in the cold void, Hegemony's Alpha 7 outpost operated silently in absolute darkness. It was one of hundreds of surveillance stations scattered throughout the solar system, a sophisticated network built to detect any potential threat from alien worlds or anomalous signals. For a decade, Alpha 7 had recorded nothing unusual. No asteroid collisions, no energy fluctuations, no signs of life beyond humanity. But today, in a moment that seemed tranquil, something in the universe shuddered, and Alpha 7 awoke. The first signal was a sudden gravitational distortion, not massive, but completely inconsistent with the trajectory of any known celestial body. Then came an anomalous magnetic wave, radiating in concentric circles, as though space itself was exhaling a series of cold, rhythmic breaths. Finally, on the station's monitoring screens, enormous black shapes emerged, not from the front, not from any planet, but from nothingness, from a point thought to be truly void. They materialized from a patch of space blacker than night, where sensors had previously reported absolute emptiness, no heat, no frequency, no reflection. Now, from that nothingness, 12 objects moved silent, synchronized, like an ancient pack of predators. Alpha 7 issued an alert. But before the transmission completed, a surge of energy from the unidentified objects swept across the station. Systems crashed momentarily, then rebooted with a flashing warning. Asterisk, asterisk. Energy shield breached. Weapon type, unknown. Asterisk, asterisk. Then, without warning, the comm system lit up, not from the station, but from an inbound signal, steady and composed, transmitted in the standard intergalactic language. Asterisk, asterisk. Hegemony Observation Post. This is Captain Kang, commander of Dreadnought, Humanity Shield. We are with the Earth Defense Force. If you maintain your position, there will be no casualties. Any attempt to alert or interfere will be considered a hostile act. Asterisk, asterisk. In that instant, the air inside the station froze. The crew, never trained for such a scenario, stood paralyzed. They had drilled for countless emergencies, but none described being caught by a force presumed defeated. And then, within seconds, they understood they had no choice. Alpha 7 had no weapons, no support vessels. They were eyes, not fists. A response was sent, weak, but clear. Asterisk, asterisk. We will not interfere. Station entering neutral observation mode. Asterisk, asterisk. Outside, the Dreadnoughts glided past like ghosts. No noise, no threats. But with every movement forward, space itself seemed to open and welcome. And behind them, a void remained, as if they weren't merely traversing space, but leaving reality itself behind. On Alpha 7 sensor screens, the technicians watched those ships with a bone-deep chill. Each Dreadnought was 5 times larger than the Hegemony's largest command vessels. Their energy readings exceeded sensor capacity at moments, reaching output comparable to a planetary reactor. But what terrified the observers wasn't the power, it was the attitude. These machines weren't scanning targets, weren't pinging radar, weren't in haste. They moved as if they had always belonged here. And then, just as silently, they vanished from Alpha 7's range, heading straight toward the space occupied by the Hegemony fleet. Inside the control room, one technician whispered like a prayer, asterisk, asterisk. They're not here to win. They came to remind us that we never truly understood Earth. Asterisk, asterisk. No one responded. Out there in the stars, the hunt had begun, pride melting away. From the command bridge of eternal glory, Admiral Kim stared at the ever-shifting tactical screen. Deep within him, something long dormant began to stir. Not fear, not doubt, but confusion, a feeling wholly unfamiliar to a man like him. Before him, the proud formation of the Hegemony, over 5,000 warships arranged in a grand spiral, held its position. Weapons were armed, shields at maximum capacity. Yet beyond the edge of sensor range, strange energy signatures continued to approach. 12 expanding distortions, no identifiable structure, no known propulsion type. Only one thing was clear: they were immense, beyond belief. Millions of kilometers away, humanity's dreadnoughts had finished deploying. They didn't take attack positions. They didn't close in on the flagships. Instead, they formed a three-dimensional web, encircling the Hegemony fleet with a tactical logic utterly alien to any known military doctrine. It wasn't a show of force, it was total containment. Still, maintaining a cold demeanor, Admiral Kim ordered increased quantum spectrum scans and attempts to decode tactical signals. But all efforts failed. The dreadnoughts broadcast nothing. No codes, no identifications. They moved like ancient beasts adrift in the void, radiating a silence more terrifying than any roar. Suddenly, one screen lit up. A broadcast, encrypted in a universal protocol, appeared. A man in black military uniform, a silver earth shield emblazoned on his chest. Across the entire Hegemony communications network, the voice of Captain Kang rang out, calm, without hatred, without threat. Only a declaration: asterisk, asterisk. You are surrounded. Disarm. Retreat now, or humanity will be forced to respond. Asterisk, asterisk. The signal cut. For a moment, silence ruled the bridge. Officers exchanged glances. No one spoke. No orders came. Then, Admiral Kim stepped forward, eyes fixed on the tactical map, surrounded on all sides. In his mind, he faced what no strategic instinct had ever prepared him for: a civilization that had pretended to be weak, to lose, to remain humble, just to deceive, and they had succeeded. He growled the order: maintain formation, weapons ready, no attack, no surrender, no more words. On the other side, Dreadnought 4, Eternal Vigilance, made the first move. A thin beam of energy, nearly invisible, cut across space and struck a small moon near Neptune. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then a faint cracking sound registered on sensor sand. The moon shattered into fragments, as if a crystal struck precisely at its weakest point. A moon completely destroyed by a thread-thin beam. The Hegemony froze. Across the galaxy's countless wars, no weapon had ever caused such destruction with such precision. No explosions, no spatial quakes, no shockwaves, just collapse. And that was only the introduction. Within minutes, all dreadnoughts opened their weapon. Beige hundreds of armored panels slid aside like steel petals blooming in the vacuum. Cannons swiveled, targeting arrays aligned. Combat processors locked onto optimal trajectories. The Hegemony reacted instinctively. Every weapon system activated across their fleet. Warships charged. Shields surged to peak levels. Plasma cannons, neutron rounds, antimatter torpedo sol were primed to fire. And in a moment that stretched across eternity, two forces stared one another down. On one side, the pride of 8,000 years of dominance. On the other, the cold darkness of an unseen, unfathomable power. Then the Hegemony fired. From thousands of points, searing beams of death surged forth, crashing toward the edge of the dreadnought web like a tidal wave of flame. Light cut across the void, searing space, igniting particles. But as the blast reached the hulls of those enormous machines, they vanished. No impact, no resistance, no response. All attacks disappeared less than a meter from their surface. Sensors glitched, data scrambled, and then the truth was confirmed. The dreadnoughts had no shields. They didn't absorb, they consumed everything. The Hegemony's ultimate weapons. Useless. At that moment, Admiral Kim understood. Understood why humanity had never used advanced tech in 10 years. Understood why every defeat was carefully calibrated to prolong the war. Understood why they still existed, not because they were weak, but because they hadn't yet chosen to win. And now that they had chosen to step into the light, the ancient pride of an empire began to melt away. The brutal drill, The moment the Hegemony's most powerful weapons vanished in silence against the Dreadnoughts, something deep within the ancient architecture of power began to fracture not through force, but through futility. Thousands of energy beams unleashed, only to be swallowed by void, a strategic black hole no defensive model could explain. And then the drill began. No alarms, no red lights, no warnings from the humans. Only a sequence of actions unfolding naturally, as if the script had been written long before. The Dreadnoughts moved. Not quickly, not recklessly. Each motion like a whisper upon the void, and the void retreated. Inside those colossal warships, mid-level officers oversaw operations. They weren't legendary warriors. They were cadets, lieutenants, fresh officers, many of whom had never faced real combat. And now, they were executing their first live exercise on an actual battlefield against an empire that ruled a third of the galaxy. The energy cannons, internally designated as celestial-class particle emitters, fired for the first time. No thunderous blasts, no blinding light, just slender blue lines racing near the speed of light, drawing death's borderlines in space. The first hit, a Hegemony heavy cruiser, the pride of Yisar. In less than 2 seconds, its molecular structure unraveled. No flames, no explosion. It simply dissolved, drifting silently as a cloud of atoms. Then the second ship, the third. Each volley was a blink, and with every blink, another warship vanished from the tactical display. From the eternal glory, Hegemony officers could only watch as their battle map dimmed to black. Allied units disappeared, leaving no trace. Internal comms were severed. Signals from other ships replaced by blank staticas, if the very universe was turning its back on them. Amidst this collapse, the Dreadnoughts began to maneuver into a three-dimensional spiral formation, a training pattern designed for combat in environments with complex gravitational layering. Every movement executed with flawless precision, like a deadly ballet across the stars. Inside, Eternal Vigilance's Asterisk control hub, an internal communication channel open. ***, drill set D completed. Target neutralized. Energy usage under 0.2% threshold. *****. Requesting permission. Set G to support Western Quadrant. Dreadnought 07 requires live sensor target for tactical calibration. *****. Approved. Limit flare output. No need for unnecessary detonations. ****. These voice calm, steady echoed throughout the Dreadnought's internal networks. No urgency, no emotion. No one spoke as if this were war, and that was what shattered the Hegemony from within. An empire built upon warfare, now being annihilated by soldiers who treated the assault like a training simulation. They weren't seen as enemies. They weren't seen as targets. They were merely exercises. By now, over 60% of the Hegemony fleet had been erased, the remainder disabled or out of contact. Escape pods, the last hope, couldn't be located. Space grew unnaturally quiet, and in that silence, a low-level Hegemony monitoring station intercepted a weakly encrypted internal signal. ****. Command, please confirm, was this attack a training exercise? ****. No reply came. Because by now, everyone already knew the answer. An invitation from the edge of the universe. 3 days after the cold slaughter in the heart of the solar system, the battleship Eternal Glory, the last remnant of the Hegemony's pride, drifted aimlessly in the thick black void. Encircled by the towering shadows of the Dreadnought formation, no resistance remained, no command, nothing but silence. Admiral Kim, no longer a symbol of authority, stood by the observation window, his gaze fixed on Earth, suspended in the tapestry of space. That familiar blue once, the mark of a primitive world, now bore the aura of a power that had hidden itself for centuries. The ship's gravity systems had been partially restored, thanks to the Dreadnoughts. All surviving crew members were transported to a diplomatic station in Earth's orbit. There were no shackles, no escorts, no accusations. Only a civility beyond imagination bestowed by the undisputed victors. Inside the station, a domed hall opened up, where the walls of glass did not reflect physical surroundings, but instead revealed an adjacent dimensiona space where light bent and flowed like a living entity. At the center of the round table, two figures awaited: Admiral Lee, Supreme Commander of the Dreadnought Fleet, and General Hoon, head of the Multidimensional Defense Command of Earth. There were no speeches, no indictments, only a cold, undeniable truth placed on the table. War with the hegemony had never been the objective. Through Admiral Lee's composed voice, Kim and the remaining senior officers were guided past a veil of truth no galactic civilization had ever pierced. For the past 500 years, humanity believed to be newcomers to the space age had silently borne a war that surpassed the comprehension of any known empire. Not a war with other nations, not with alien races, but with the void entities, formless, massless beings that did not belong to three-dimensional space, and that possessed the power to fracture the fabric of reality. They did not come from planets. They did not travel through stargates. They bled through fractures in dimensions, where the line between existence and non-existence blurred into perilous ambiguity. Humanity's first contact with the void came during a space experiment in 2187, when a group of scientists accidentally tore a micro-rift into an undefined zone. At first, they saw nothing. But hours later, participants in the experiment began to vanish, not dying, but being erased from reality. And from that moment, the war began. No battles, no lights, just a race between understanding and extinction. Kim sat frozen as sensor footage was projected: dark space fractures, moving like living things. Dreadnoughts engaging in silent wars at the edge of the galaxy, battling foes for which no thanks had ever been spoken. Admiral Lee did not blame the hegemony. On the contrary, she admitted, had humanity not hidden the truth, they would have been annihilated long ago by the void, but by the fear of other civilizations. History had proven that. Once, humanity approached a civilization called the Arcturians, seeking aid. The result? The Arcturians struck first, and they vanished, without a trace within 72 hours sea race from the stars, by the very force Kim had now witnessed. Asterisk, asterisk. We don't want to do that again. Asterisk, asterisk, Lee said. Asterisk, asterisk. But if we must, we won't hesitate. Asterisk, asterisk. Kim realized he no longer had a choice, but he also understood this wasn't a threat. It was an invitation. Asterisk. Humanity didn't want subordinates. They needed allies. General Hoon presented a map of dimensional fractures widening across the galaxy's rim points where the void was beginning to seep through. Even though the Dreadnoughts were technological marvels, their numbers were limited. Humanity was stretched thin, and they knew if the final barrier broke, no one in this universe would survive. Asterisk, asterisk. We're not fighting the hegemony. Asterisk, asterisk, Lee concluded. Asterisk, asterisk. We're fighting extinction. Asterisk, asterisk. Kim looked at the distorted space projected behind the glass, where light shattered like glass and matter curled inward, as if afraid of something buried within. For the first time in his life, he did not think of orders, not of power. He thought only of survival, a new covenant of the galaxy. When the meeting concluded, there was no applause, no ceremonial exchange of flags or signatures. Only silence lingered in the circular chamber floating in the heart of the stars, where the past, present, and future of the galaxy had just collided and intertwined. No more pride, no more grand ideals, only the raw truth. No civilization could stand alone in this universe. Admiral Kim stepped out of the chamber, his eyes drifting through the transparent glass toward the infinite void where light itself seemed drawn into a single point, where time slowed, and where something older than language waited in silence. He knew, if he failed to convince the Hegemony Council, their very existence and that of the entire galaxy would be reduced to a data point in the memory banks of the Dreadnoughts. Within the protective formation of Earth's warships, the Eternal Glory was repaired and retrofitted, not as a released prisoner, but as a future ally. 2 Dreadnoughts, Unity Hammer and Sentinel Horizon, were assigned to escort the ship back to Hegemony space, not as guards, but as living witnesses, physical proof of something once thought impossible. Humanity had become the final bulwark of the universe. Inside the command bay, Kim sat in solemn reflection as he received the strategic data package from General Hoon detailing everything about the void entities, the rift structures, potential incursion zones, and multi-dimensional defense designs. He didn't know how the Hegemony Council would react, but he knew one thing for certain: no one could deny what he had seen. Beyond the glass, Earth gradually shrank in the distance. A planet once underestimated, once labeled primitive Eno, stood tall, a sentinel at the threshold of realities. And within it were people who had fought in silence for centuries, not only for their own kind, but for those who had once called them savages. At the brief farewell, Admiral Lee spoke only one sentence before the fleet departed. Asterisk, asterisk. We don't want war, but if forced to fight, we will end it before it begins. Asterisk, asterisk. The return journey to Hegemony space took 3 weeks, enough time for Admiral Kim to reflect not just on strategy, but on his empire's place within the vast cosmos. He realized that arrogance had blinded an entire civilization. They had believed in power, in legacy, in prestige, while the true threat came from forces outside any known paradigm. As the ship passed the edge of the solar system, a rare event occurred. A small space-time rift appeared on the sensors, not large, but unmistakably unnatural. And as if to underscore the final message, one of Earth's dreadnoughts moved forward, fired a directed energy beam into the Tyrant, sealed it shut within seconds. No explanation, no declaration. But for Kim, it said everything. Before exiting Earth's influence, he turned back for one last glance at the space folding behind them. Asterisk, asterisk. We didn't awaken them. Asterisk, asterisk, he thought. Asterisk, asterisk. They were always awake, only watching to see if we were worthy to stand beside them. Asterisk, asterisk. And in that moment, a new covenant of the galaxy was forged, not with ink, not with symbols, but through the shared understanding that existence does not guarantee survival unless we stand together. Asterisk, asterisk.